Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this installment of In Conversation With. Today, we are honored to have Jeff Boeckler from Northwater Consulting. And you may ask yourself, Northwater Consulting, what does that have to do with hemp? Well, we're going to find out. Welcome, Jeff. How are you?
I'm great. Hi, Erica. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. So let's talk a little bit about what is Northwater Consulting and what do you do?
Yeah, so we are a small water consulting company based out of Springfield, Illinois, and we specialize in really anything water. We kind of have two distinct arms, one that handles groundwater, and most of that is kind of on the groundwater exploration end of things, and then small water system design and distribution. And a lot of that work actually is done internationally in third world countries that, are starving for water, have a hard time finding water. On the domestic side of things, most of our work revolves around managing surface water resources and primarily public water supplies. So that would be like a community I'm going to be talking about here in a second. They built a reservoir for their drinking water supply, and they have challenges with, higher treatment costs related to nutrient loading or issues with reservoir capacity and water quantity because their reservoirs are filling up. So that's kind of the focus of our business. We do a lot of kind of applied science, water quality modeling, and then, like I said, exploration of groundwater resources.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, so now the big question is how are you involved with hemp? I know there's a grant involved here that we are proud to be participating in. But let's talk a little bit about the broad scope of the project, and then we can talk a little bit more about the hemp piece of it, which is a small piece of it, but I think hopefully a very important piece.
Yeah, absolutely important. Okay, so I'm gonna dig into the city of Decatur here. That was one of those communities I had just earlier touched on. The city of Decatur is located in central Illinois, right in the heart of the Corn Belt, in Macon County. It's home to Archer-Daniel Midlands and a lot of other ag supportive industries. They have a rather large reservoir, roughly 3,000 acres in size, that supplies water to their residents, some adjoining communities, and then a lot of it actually goes to the processing of materials at the Archer-Daniel Midlands plant, millions and millions of gallons per day. So there's a huge demand on that reservoir in terms of water supply. And roughly 4 or 5 years ago, the city wrapped up a multi-million-dollar dredging effort to reclaim 30% of the lake's holding capacity. That program cost roughly $98 million. After the bonds are paid off and the loans are paid off, that is almost going to be double. It resulted in a roughly 400-acre sediment dewatering basin next to the lake where all the dredge material went and is now drying, hopefully for beneficial use in the future. So it's roughly 400 acres in size and almost 30 feet deep, full of sediment. So about a year and a half or 2 years ago, the city council decided, we really want to protect this investment and not have to dredge again in the next 20 years. We want to, we believe that a lot of our sediment's coming from our watershed, which it is, and how do we address that? In addition to that, the city does have challenges periodically during each year around June with high nitrate levels. So nitrogen flows into the reservoir. When it exceeds the drinking water standard that the Illinois EPA has placed on reservoirs that supply drinking water, the city has to actually treat for that. It costs them roughly $200,000 a year to turn on a whole separate treatment scheme just to deal with that nitrate, take that nitrate out of the drinking water so that they don't have to supply bottled water to their clients. So this reservoir is extremely important, right? It is the engine of the local economy. Those industries wouldn't be there if they didn't have it. And so ensuring that that is an adequate supply of good quality is important, very, very important to that community and frankly, the region. So we were hired about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, to help them figure out how to keep sediment out of, and nutrients out of the reservoir and prolong that investment. And we're going about that in several different ways. One of the big challenges actually with this particular watershed and reservoir is the size of its watershed, which is almost 500,000 acres. From
Wow.
a watershed management standpoint, that's a daunting size to deal with, meaning that in order to see a response in the reservoir, a lot of work has to be done in the watershed in a either very, very targeted fashion or at massive levels, right? It's a little bit here, a little bit there is not gonna, you're not even gonna notice that in, the tracking data, which by the way, we have a really robust monitoring network and the streams and the lake itself to help identify those changes. So where do we start, right? And so my company we began with developing a series of science-based watershed plans. These watershed plans are important because they identify the issues, where those issues are coming from, how much of those issues there are, from where, and then what specifically to do about it to generate the biggest bang for the buck in the reservoir. Those plans are also a requirement to receiving funding, and that is the only way funding from the state, federal governments, and other nonprofit groups or industry folks that have an interest in, conservation and improving water quality. Having a plan is a really important piece of that because you can point to that when you're asking for gobs of money. So we started by putting those watershed plans together, and then from there, after we knew where we wanted to work, and throughout that process, we crunched a lot of numbers and looked at a lot of historical and current data, and came to the conclusion that the vast majority of the sediment load and nitrogen and phosphorus, which are the two nutrients we're targeting, is coming from a very small part of the overall watershed, primarily from areas that drain quicker or are closer to the lake. And the reason for that is because nitrogen up at the very top of the watershed in the headwaters may be leaving units of land at very high rates, but by the time it actually gets to Lake Decatur, it is denitrified and is half of what it used to be. But the stuff really close to the reservoir is available in the reservoir instantly. It doesn't have a time to denitrify. This pardon me, the same goes for sediment. Sediment, it's heavier than dissolved nitrogen in the water. It bounces along the ground. It gets trapped in areas and buffer strips and ponds or whatever. And so the closer you are to a receiving water body, the higher the loading of the sediment, right? So you get actually a higher yield. That's what we call yield, means per acre as opposed to total load of sediment. You get a higher yield the closer you are to the lake. So we have prioritized a series of sub watersheds within the larger basin to do work, and these watershed plans have helped us identify a series of fields where we feel that by targeting those areas or focusing efforts on those areas, we can achieve a relatively high reduction at a much lower unit cost. So now when we've got that in place, the next thing is, how the heck do we fund this? Because those changes in what farmers are doing on their land in this watershed is almost 90% row crop agriculture, right? So that's obviously where the vast majority of all this stuff is coming from. Yes, there's a lot of stuff the city can do in the lake, stabilize shorelines, and we're doing that. But the bigger, the real benefits are going to come from managing the watershed and a lot of those ag acres. And it's not most farmers, even though a lot of them practice conservation, implementing new management strategies like some of the ones we're proposing, which are cover crops, right? Having constant cover on that ground year round, not tilling it as much, so leaving the residue from the previous harvest on the ground itself, and managing their nutrients more effectively is a change in management, something different that they may or may not be doing already. And therefore, they need some financial assistance. So, and when you're talking about the acres we're talking about to get the big reductions we would like to see, we need a lot of money. And although the city is investing a substantial amount in helping this process move along, it's not nearly enough. In comes the federal grants, and right now, the federal government is, I call it spewing out, they are pumping out a whole lot of money for climate smart type stuff and conservation, carbon sequestration, climate change related stuff that fits, firmly into our goals as well, which is to get those practices on the ground. And so there's just a huge amount of money available. One of the key programs, and rather than taking up all the time on this Zoom to get into the other grant programs, I'll focus on the one that is the big one that we were awarded last year, and that's through the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Regional Conservation Partnership Program, or RCPP. This program is big dollars are available. It was designed to help the U.S. Department of Agriculture allocate money to specific areas. So the way their programs traditionally work is whoever comes in and talks to them, very likely gets funding, right? And what that's resulted in is a lot of the same people coming in to get the same pot of money. There's not, even though it's kind of structured around improving water quality, the results haven't really, there isn't quite a tie-in. When you do stuff more shotgun approach all over the place, it's really hard to tie in the water quality benefits of that. So the RCPP kind of changes that a little bit, in that it allows a dedicated amount of money with some slight flexibilities, because most of these federal programs are, very difficult to navigate, lots of paperwork, very inflexible. The RCPP adds a little bit more flexibility. That's kind of how hemp comes in too. And then it also allows partners, hence Regional Partnership Program, and the City of Decatur, in the case of their RCPP, the ability to bring in other people and leverage other work that's going on, either in the watershed or bringing in other work from outside into the watershed, to leverage that USDA dollars to get even more conservation on the ground. So they require well, they don't now, but when we applied for it, they required a match. So for every dollar you wanted from that program, you had to bring in X number of dollars elsewhere, either as cash or as what's called in-kind or equivalent services. So the Decatur RCPP that we applied for a year and a half or so ago, and are very close to actually being able to spend right now, leveraged approximately $15 million. The National Hemp Association and roughly 50 other partners contributed to allow us to receive $9.8 million in cash from the USDA that will be distributed almost entirely to farmers in the watershed for those practices I mentioned, primary practices, which are cover crops, nutrient management, and tillage management. There's some other things that are a part of this, including hemp, which I'll get into in a second here. But that's the overarching program that is being used to implement these plans and ideally get us the reductions we need to the reservoir.
I love it. It's so exciting. And as I'm hearing you talk about it again, it's all coming back to me of why I've been so excited about this project. There's a whole lot of buzz going around about carbon credits, and yes, the climate smart commodities and carbon sequestration, but you very rarely hear people talking about water, and what this can mean to the watershed. So this is a whole nother aspect to it that really brings home the importance of this kind of research, and helping to encourage farmers, which I imagine it is difficult to change your practices, especially when they've been working and have been profitable, and then all of a sudden you're being asked to kind of completely shift gears. And I'm certain that there is a way that farmers can do this, and it can be just as, if not more, lucrative to them, particularly when carbon credits do become more of a real thing, because these farmers who are going to be doing it now, in looking at preserving and protecting the watershed, are going to be ready to collect carbon credits, because everything that they're doing for this is also going to qualify them for that.
Yeah.
So
That's
it
an
is
added benefit.
really,
Absolutely. They can stack that stuff on top of the very generous payments we're offering through the RCPP. Absolutely.
and so I just find this super exciting for many reasons. I mean, because watersheds need protection, and there's watersheds all over the country. So what you're doing here in Decatur really could have tremendous benefit all across the country. Because I have every faith that this is going to be wildly successful. And
Well, that's the key. Yes. I mean, we hope it becomes a national model for, how to manage a watershed of that scale, and truly apply conservation in a fashion that maximizes the water quality benefits as opposed to just stuff that just goes wherever, right? And that's what's making this challenging, is applying these things in a deliberate fashion is 10 times harder than doing it the way it has always been done. So,
right.
yeah.
Yeah,
So where
and
does hemp
change
fit
is
in, right?
hard, right? It's
Yeah.
change can always be hard, but it's almost always for the better. Um, so yeah, I believe that we had the pleasure of first meeting you at the Farm Progress Show in Decatur. I think you met our chair Jeff back then, before for the application. So what made you think that hemp could be a piece of this puzzle?
Yeah, that's a good question. So a couple of reasons. Number one, look from a water quality perspective, right? Looking at hemp as a yet another non-monoculture crop of corn and soybeans that we could add to the mix that generates revenue for producers, but also, hold soil in place, uptakes nutrients, and other things. That's a big part of it. And then I guess the sustainability, all of this, right? So um, right now, there's not a lot of crop diversity in the watershed, right? It's kind of traditional stuff. Yes, there's some things going on a small scale, but I personally believe, if we are going to be effective at this long term, we have to have a better mix of crops. And I think that hemp is a perfect addition to that, to add some diversity in the watershed in terms of what landowners can generate revenues from, and then also a crop that might be better, frankly, for retaining that soil and uptaking those nutrients than some of the other traditional ones. So that's kind of what drew me to hemp. Also, I saw an opportunity, obviously, to bring on another partner and help us leverage additional dollars, but more so it was really about let's test out something new, because I like trying new things that nobody else really does, and let's see if we can make it feasible, right? And so really the whole goal of incorporating hemp in here, besides the water quality benefits, is to see if we can't get a local market or have that underlying driver that would support the cropping of it long term develop, right? If you don't have a market, people aren't buying it, you're not going to be able to grow it. And this is a great way to utilize some of this government money to kind of beta test that, right? And see if we can actually expand the amount of acres. And so far it's actually going quite well.
So when we're talking about so what is the time frame of this grant? Is it a year, 5 years, 10 years? What is the length of time that this will be happening?
Yeah, so the overall watershed management is an endless thing, right? It's never going to end. It takes a long time to, generate results from treatments in a watershed. So that's going to be ongoing. But this particular program, the RCPP, is a 5-year program. There are options kind of mid-contract, like halfway through, that if you're doing a really good job spending that money, they can start tacking on and giving extensions and kind of keep going. But it is 5 years. And so that means we are offering up to 5-year contracts with growers and landowners in the watershed for hemp, and all the other conservation practices. We are hoping, if we can get all the paperwork in from the USDA and finalize some things, that money could start going out the door as soon as March of 2024. We've actually already started working through a lot of our partner in kind or contributions. Remember, I mentioned before that these 50 partners have contributed X, Y, and Z. So a lot of that is actually already underway. And we have out at the dewatering basin, I mentioned that 400-acre pile of sediment from the city. We have 60 acres of hemp actually that just got harvested the other day or is about to get harvested. So we're working through those contributions now, but the federal dollars will go out the door early 2024.
That's amazing. So the test acres, or well, I guess 60 is a little bit more than test acres, that you grew on the city land, was that just sort of getting in preparation for approaching the farmers to ask them to do it, or was that land also in the watershed area?
Yeah, so a little bit of both. It's in the watershed area. It was the whole idea. Well, there's two parts of this. Number one, can we do something with that dewatering basin, right? So right now the city is essentially just paying taxes on it and mowing it, right? And that's a lot of land that could be utilized to generate revenue.
Right.
And it's a challenge to do anything with that area because it's still quite wet. But there are areas that have dried significantly enough. So we wanted to try hemp to see if it would grow effectively out there and could be a future revenue stream for the city. We've also tossed around ideas, about organic cropping. That's a little bit more challenging just because there's so many weeds actually out there. And then in addition to that, talking about beneficial reuse of the sediment, some folks have offered to come in and take the sediment, but then once they realize what they're getting into, that never goes anywhere, right? So we wanted to use it as a demonstration project, something where we could get our feet wet, promote it and show it during field days to other landowners that might be on the fence about planting hemp on their ground, but really see if we can get something out of that basin to work, and it worked.
That's amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
especially since like hemp kind of is known for not actually liking to have wet feet. So the fact that it did so well there is fantastic. So was it fiber varietals or grain varietals that you grew?
This crop was for seed, and then I'm not sure what's happening next year, but I think they're going to replant next year. They do have another lease. Tiger Fiber is the company that is doing it, and I think it's going to be for fiber next year, but don't quote me on that.
Excellent. Yeah, so speaking of, Tiger Fiber has been a partner, and the Illinois Hemp Growers Association, shout out to them for the help that they're giving for this project, because it's super exciting. And then so over the 5 years, are you going to have the farmers grow hemp, that the ones that agree to do it, for the entire 5 years? Are you going to have them rotate it with their other crops that they're currently growing and compare data as to, is the hemp preventing more runoff than the other crops? Is it, we know that it will likely use less nutrients, which by default should decrease the runoff. But the other factors in terms of its ability to be good for erosion control and having an extensive root system that will hopefully prevent some of that runoff from happening.
Yeah, so
place.
that's a great question, and I guess my answer to that is we're still trying to flush that out a little bit. So I remember when we were first talking about this partnership that we had thrown around the idea of edge of field monitoring, which we want to do. We haven't quite gotten to what that looks like yet. I think that is something that we as a group are going to have to probably have yet a separate meeting about and start figuring out what that's going to look like. We just wanted to get the hemp on the ground to start with, right? Like, let's get it growing as soon as we can. We'd like to be able to offer an entire 5 years worth of contracts to people to do this, but it may be just a 1 year and then wait a year, another year. We can do up to 5-year contracts, but it would be anywhere between 1 and 5.
Excellent. There's just so much exciting stuff. And I think it's exciting to see the city of Decatur, doing this and being open to trying new crops and new things, and hemp in particular. It's just super exciting all around. So you expect it to kind of get going, hopefully in full force next year.
Yeah, so if we can get this paperwork and signatures from the USDA a lot sooner than later, and I've been waiting, frankly, way too long as it is,
Mhm.
I can get some clarity on what our payment rates will be for hemp. I'd like to see acres on the ground in the 2024 growing season. If it doesn't, it'll obviously have to wait till next year, because coming up pretty quick, growers are going to be making their planting decisions for 2024. And if
Yeah.
we don't get them into hemp, it's going to have to wait a year. But that's all contingent on the USDA. But the way it would work actually is there would be a rental payment through the U.S. Department of Agriculture at however many hundreds of dollars per acre. And then the landowner on top of that would get assistance from us, from our partners, on licensing, testing, and other things related to actually getting that field set up. And then Tiger Fiber would come in if the landowner chooses to do so and enter into an offtake agreement. So with the rental payment, that offtake agreement, and all the assistance on the licensing and everything, and us shepherding the landowner through this, we believe it'll be so lucrative that I can't say no.
That's certainly
We can
what
get a
it
lot of
sounds like.
acres in. Yes.
Sounds like it's going to be a much better deal for them than just, like planting corn and soy again.
We hope so, and add some diversity. And if it works out for them, they keep doing it, even better. And that's the goal, right? And then we have this local product, which ideally will help stimulate local markets as well. And there has been talk in Decatur about having a processing facility, because right now I think Tiger Fiber ships that all the way to somewhere around St. Louis or Sauget, Illinois, or something like that. Why not have a processing facility local? If we have enough of it growing to support that, that's becomes a reality, right? And even better. And
Yeah,
we're going to be working towards that.
and it helps break this whole chicken and the egg cycle, right? Because I mean, and that's the extra brilliance of, aside from obviously the environmental benefits and the water benefits, that for getting processing installed, it has always been the chicken and the egg. Like, how do you incentivize farmers to grow it if there's nobody to process it? And how do you convince a processor to set up shop if nobody's growing it? So by using this money in this way, I absolutely believe it's going to help you attract processing there. And seriously, there's no such thing as too many. Like we have, probably less than 10 in the country, full scale commercial processors, and we need a whole bunch. So yeah, this is just brilliant on so many levels.
Yeah,
And
right.
I'm so excited to see how it all unfolds. I know you had sent me some photos of the hemp that grew there this year, and I will share those when we share this interview. And it's just amazing what a little imagination and a little, well, and the perseverance to deal with getting the government funding. Like, bless you for that. I know that is not easy, because it's been what, a year since you got the award, and still hammering out the last bits of.
More than a year.
That was
August,
August. Was it August?
not this last August, but the August before we were awarded it.
Yeah.
Awarded it.
Wow. So
Yeah.
more than a year to, from the time you win to the time you can potentially start spending money.
It's deadly, but the wheels are in motion, right? All that didn't stop all the partners. I mean, we've been working together already. We've got that pilot hemp field out at this. I mean, even without the USDA money, going out the door, we're doing lots of fantastic stuff in the watershed. We didn't stop. We didn't wait. We kept going.
That's excellent. Yeah. So just the promise and the knowing that it's coming is
Yeah.
a lot of times enough to get things started.
Yep.
Um,
And hopefully as we get in it, because we're just starting this, right? Once people start learning more and hearing more and seeing more, I think things will continue to snowball. And I'm confident that will help happen with the hemp part of it too. Even if we start with a limited amount of acres, by the end of this, I want to see a lot more than we had proposed to put in.
Yep,
way
and
more.
I have every confidence that you will. And so I hope that you will invite us when you do your first field day. Because I am very excited to come see this all in action.
Actually, we should at some point start talking about that for next summer because one of our big partners is the Illinois Farm Bureau, and every year they host a field day. And although we had one out at that dewatering basin 2 years ago, the hemp wasn't out there. Nothing was out there aside from just the weeds and the sediment. So that might be a perfect spot to have that day this upcoming summer, because that would be right in the prime time growing portion of that hemp field. So yes, we should do that.
Yeah, well, yeah, we'll talk offline about that, but yeah, let's do it. That sounds super exciting, and hopefully we can get the farmers excited about it too.
I think so. We've already had interest. So we even that pilot program alone, once the word got out about it going on the dewatering basin, the city had several meetings with land managers in the watershed just to come out and talk and learn about it and see how that might apply to their fields.
Excellent.
So
What more
if
can
you
you
can
ask?
make money off of it, if you can make good money off of it, people are willing to consider it.
That's yep. And at the end of the day, well, that's leads right back to the processing of it too. And that's why it's like, yeah, the fact that Tiger Fiber was able to come in and be that offtake partner, I think was really an important piece of making this a lot more practical.
Way more practical. Yeah, I mean, it just gives that extra chunk of money, and then also logistical support too, right? To actually get the
Mhm.
stuff harvested and moved and stuff. It saves us actually quite a bit of work trying to organize all that when they can just come in and handle it. Yeah, it was great to get linked up with them.
Excellent. All right. Well, I am super excited to keep tabs on this and hopefully we can do another one of these next year and have an update progress report. As always, we're here to help and look forward to doing that as well. Very much appreciate you taking the time with us today to talk about this project, and I hope that everybody else is as excited about it as I am. And thank you for everything that you've done so far and everything that you're going to be doing. Super appreciated, and I think it is very promising for the industry as a whole.
Don't thank me, thank the city of Decatur. I mean, I've got to give accolades to them mainly because it's so rare for us to find a community that is just all in on this, the watershed management. They have put a lot of money and staff resources behind making sure this is a success. And without them, this wouldn't have even happened. So,
Yeah,
um,
definitely shout out to the city of Decatur.
yeah.
Yes, good. Thank
And,
you.
and anybody listening to this, if you have a research interest in maybe helping us evaluate the outcomes of hemp, we would love to work with you or toss around some ideas because we are a little bit light on those details at this point. So yeah.
Okay, good. And to that point, if you have specific needs like that, let me know, and we can definitely put some extra feelers out to see if we can help fill in those gaps.
Yeah, we should talk about that, start getting that lined up. Because that can go a lot of different ways, right? I mean, edge of field monitoring can get very expensive, but we're also close to some major universities here that might have an interest in that as well. And it just takes a while to get research projects going. So we should have that discussion sooner than later.
Okay, well, we will
Yeah,
definitely do that.
cool.
Um, all right, well, thank you again for joining us. It's been a pleasure as always, and I will look forward to doing another update like this, hopefully early, well, whenever next year that makes sense.
Okay. Likewise, sounds good. Yeah, let's stay in touch.
We will. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this installment of In Conversation With, and we'll see you next time.